But I think it's pretty important that I go everywhere and that I'm accountable and listen. Even if someone disagrees with me or would never vote for me, that doesn't lessen my responsibility to pay attention and be respectful, to show up and be respectful. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity today to talk about things you want to talk about, answer your questions, whatever they might be. Because of all the work we do for veterans, a family came to my office about 2 years ago about their father, asked along with a number of other soldiers to be part of a mustard gas experiment that our military did on our men. He was told at the time that he could not ever speak of this to anyone, that it was top secret and classified. And so, of course, being the honorable member of the greatest generation, he didn't ever say a word to anyone. And he had multiple related health problems throughout his life, respiratory, skin. Finally, in the 90s, the Department of Defense said that the experiments would no longer be classified and he was free to talk about it. And so, along with thousands of other men that had had these experiments done on them, he went to the VA and said, I would like to make a claim for all my physical ailments related to these experiments. And because they hadn't kept good records of where they did these tests and who they did them on, they said to him, well, you're going to have to prove it. Now think about the reality of that. He's been told to keep it a secret for decade after decade after decade, and then the Department of Defense and VA doesn't even have good records about who they were done on, but yet he's the one that's expected to pick up and carry the burden of proof. So we went to work and we found proof that these experiments had in fact been done at Camp Crowder and Neosho, even though the Department of Defense claimed they hadn't been. And we thought we'd think we'd make progress and then we wouldn't get it across the finish line. I finally said we got to change the law. There's only 300 of these men still alive. We need to change the law so the burden of proof is on the VA to prove that they did not have these experiments done. That seemed fair to me at that point. They're the ones that have the access to the information, not Arla Harrell. Now, we were able to get that law passed, and last week I found out that Arla Harrell is getting all of his back benefits and $7,000 a month for the rest of his life. Broken through with all the noise in Washington. How many of you have a hearing aid? Okay, how many of you need a hearing aid but can't afford it or don't want to pay the money? Yeah, Medicare doesn't cover hearing aids, and they're very, very expensive, between $5,000 and $7,000 for a hearing aid. And have you ever wondered why you can get glasses over the counter at Walmart but you can't get a hearing aid? Regulations. Regulations supported by the hearing aid industry. So a bunch of us got together, Republicans and Democrats, a group of both, and said, let's blow up that regulation so that for limited hearing loss, you'll be able to get it across the counter at Walmart or Sam's Club or online, just like you can glasses, for a much lower price. We were able to get that across the finish line and to the President's desk, and the analysts say that within a year, it ought to bring the price of those hearing aids down to somewhere between $350 and $500 from thousands. Bill that took away some of the loopholes that are currently in the tax code. We had 7 books for the federal tax code, 10,000 pages apiece. $70,000, excuse me, 70,000 pages of text that is both the law and all the regs. Now, complexity is the playground of tax evasion. Okay? That's where they can find all these loopholes they can duck in and out of and pay less. So right now, the real tax rate, even though ours is very high around the world, it's much less because some corporations don't pay much of anything, because they can legally avoid taxes based on various provisions in the tax code. If they would be willing to take some of those goodies out, like carried interest or like-kind exchanges, and I could name a dozen of them, there'd be 70 of us that would vote to lower the corporate rate. Not a problem, permanently, not a problem. And then double the child tax credit, but make it refundable, so people that make less than $50,000 a year would get more than $100. Not let the child tax credit go all the way to $500,000 like they have. I mean, it used to phase out at 110. We ought to phase it out at about 150, but they took it all the way to $500,000. I don't know very many people in Missouri that need help from the federal government caring for their children if they're making $500,000 a year. I just don't know very many people in Missouri that should have the government helping them at that point. So, and if they did that, and then repatriated the money at 10% and took half of it for infrastructure, they could get, I'm telling you, they could get 70 senators to be for it. But that's not what they're doing. They're not getting rid of the loopholes. They admitted to me in the markup last week, the Joint Committee on Taxation, they're going to add another book. So we're going to go from 7 books to 8 books in terms of complexity. You start reading their territorial stuff and their international stuff and the pass-through stuff and what they're putting in this, and it's very complex. It's very complex. It's not simple. It's about as far from simple as you can possibly get. The things that were said to me and the language I had to put up with. And then I got elected to the Missouri legislature in 1982, and once again, there was a lot of things said to me and around me that, and I was made the butt of a bunch of jokes that were inappropriate. Many of my colleagues were as good as they come, salt of the earth, God-loving, God-fearing people that did nothing but be friendly, Republicans and Democrats. But there were also some people, and especially in leadership positions, that said things to me that I won't even repeat to you because they make me uncomfortable to say them out loud. So I'm hoping that this is, now I never had the courage to come forward. I was worried what it would do to my career. I was worried what people thought of me. I was worried that it was going to hurt me and not the person who did it. But now I think people are coming forward. And I think women are coming forward. And women are saying that this conduct is no longer acceptable. And I think it's a turning of the page in our country that's probably a very, very positive thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because whenever there's somebody in power who tries to take advantage of somebody who's not in power, our system ought to be able to step in and fix it. And that's what this is really about. In the old days, in fact, through our entire history, what's happened in the Senate is as follows. We took the 15 most conservative senators and then we put them on one curb. And we put the 15 most liberal senators and we put them on the other curb. And the remaining 70 senators, comprised of both parties, hammered away until we got a compromise. Hammered away until we found a way forward, consensus. And if we're going to try to drive in from the left, or like they're trying to do now, drive in from the right, it's not going to work very well. And Americans are going to get more and more cynical and more angry about how their government is non-functioning, dysfunctional, not working, not getting anything done. So I believe I am a moderate, and some of you that were big Bernie supporters may find that irritating. But I do vote with my Republican colleagues more often than many of the other Democrats. I am not one of the 15 most liberal members of the Senate. I believe in compromise. I think our country right now is desperate for stable, common sense compromise in the middle. That's what I think we ought to be working on, and that's what I'm going to continue to work on.